When did you realize your spouse's late nights at work were actually a second apartment? I found the lease agreement in his gym bag on a Monday in March. He'd asked me to grab his water bottle because he forgot it in the car. The papers were folded under his workout clothes. 1247 Oakmont Avenue, apartment 3B. 12-month lease starting September. His signature at the bottom next to a woman's name I didn't recognize. Rachel Dumont, co-tenant. My hands shook holding those pages. We'd been married 6 years, lived together for 8. I stood in our garage staring at proof my husband had been renting another apartment for 6 months without telling me. The address was 15 minutes from our house. 15 minutes from where I slept every night believing he was working late at the firm. I took photos of every page with my phone, put the papers back exactly how I found them, walked inside and made dinner pretending everything was normal. David came home at 9 that night. He kissed my forehead and said the Mercer case was killing him. Long hours, difficult client, might be like this for a few more weeks. I asked if he wanted dinner and he said he'd grabbed something at the office. He smelled like cologne I didn't recognize. Not the one I bought him for Christmas, something woodsy and expensive. He went upstairs to shower and I sat at the kitchen table looking at the photos on my phone. The lease was clear. Monthly rent of $2,000 split between 2 tenants. His bank account linked for automatic payments. Our joint account that I had access to showed his regular paycheck deposits and normal expenses. Nothing unusual, which meant he had another account I didn't know about. I worked from home as a freelance graphic designer. David was a corporate attorney at Fisher & Lane downtown. His hours had always been unpredictable, but 6 months ago, they became a pattern. Late nights Monday and Wednesday, sometimes Friday. He'd text around 6 saying he'd be home by 10. Sometimes it was midnight. I'd learn to eat dinner alone and be asleep when he got back, or pretend to be asleep. I thought I was being a supportive wife, understanding about the demands of his career. Meanwhile, he'd been paying rent on a second apartment with a woman whose name I'd never heard. I waited until he was asleep that night. Then I went downstairs and searched his office. His home office was off limits usually. Client confidentiality, he said. Attorney work product that I shouldn't accidentally see. I'd respected that boundary for years. Now I went through every drawer and filing cabinet. Found nothing about the apartment. His work laptop was password protected. I tried our anniversary, my birthday, his birthday. Nothing worked. I checked his desk calendar and saw his actual schedule. Court dates, depositions, client meetings, all during normal business hours. The evenings were blank. No notes about working late. No case names written down. Just empty spaces where he claimed to be drowning in paperwork. I took photos of the calendar pages from the past 6 months. Evidence of the gaps between what he told me and what his schedule actually showed. Tuesday morning, I called Fisher & Lane, asked to speak with David's secretary. The receptionist connected me to a woman named Julie who'd worked with him for 3 years. I told her I was David's wife and needed to confirm his schedule for a family matter. She pulled up his calendar without hesitation. He had a deposition at 2 and a client meeting at 4. Nothing after 5. I asked about the Mercer case he'd mentioned. She paused and said she wasn't familiar with any client named Mercer. Asked if I meant the Morrison case from last year that already settled. I thanked her and hung up. Sat in my home office staring at my computer screen. The Mercer case didn't exist. My husband had been lying about working late for 6 months using a fake case name. I drove to Oakmont Avenue that afternoon. The building was newer construction, maybe 5 years old. Nice brick exterior, landscaped entrance, security keypad at the front door. I parked across the street and waited. Didn't know what I was looking for. Confirmation, maybe. Proof that the address was real and not some elaborate mistake I'd misunderstood. At 4:30, a woman came out the front entrance. Mid-30s, dark hair, professional clothes. She walked to a silver sedan parked in the lot. I wrote down her license plate number. She could have been anyone. Could have been Rachel Dumont or just another tenant. I waited another hour, but David never showed up. Made sense since it was Tuesday. He came home at normal time on Tuesdays. That evening, David got home at 6. We ate dinner together and he talked about his day. Mentioned a difficult opposing counsel and a judge who was unreasonable. Details that sounded real and specific. He'd always been a good storyteller. That was probably why I'd never questioned his late-night excuses. He asked about my work and I told him about a logo design I was finishing for a new client. Normal married conversation over pasta and salad. He offered to do the dishes. I went upstairs and called my friend Lindsay, who worked in property management. Asked if she could run an address for me. She said technically she wasn't supposed to, but yes. I gave her the Oakmont Avenue address and she said she'd text me whatever she found. Lindsay sent me information an hour later. The building was owned by Westfield Property Group, managed by their downtown office. Apartment 3B was a 2-bedroom unit, 900 square feet, currently leased to David Fletcher and Rachel Dumont. Lease started September 1st. No prior complaints or issues. Monthly rent $2,400 split between both tenants, utilities included. I read the text 3 times. David Fletcher was my husband. He'd been paying $1,200 a month for 6 months on an apartment I didn't know existed. That was over $7,000 hidden from me. I checked our joint account again. His paycheck was deposited every 2 weeks like clockwork. But if he was paying $1,200 extra per month, that money had to come from somewhere. Which meant he had income I didn't know about, or he'd been hiding money before getting the apartment. I needed to see inside that apartment, needed to understand what he was doing there 3 nights a week. Friday evening, David texted at 6 saying he'd be late. Big deadline. Sorry, love you. I texted back understanding and supportive words. Then I drove to Oakmont Avenue. His car was in the parking lot. Black Audi sedan parked in spot 3B, reserved parking for his apartment. I sat in my car watching the building. Lights were on in a third-floor window facing the parking lot. I pulled up the building floor plan on the property management website. Third-floor corner unit. That would be 3B. The lights stayed on until 11. Then they went off. I waited. David came out at 11:30 and drove away. I followed him at a distance. He drove straight home, parked in our garage, came inside and found me reading in bed. He kissed me and said he was exhausted, asked if I'd eaten dinner. I said yes hours ago. He went to shower and I lay there in the dark thinking about him spending 5 hours in that apartment. Doing what? Meeting who? Rachel Dumont, obviously, but I still didn't know who she was. I searched her name on social media Saturday morning. Found a LinkedIn profile for Rachel Dumont, marketing consultant, graduated from State University 4 years ago. Her profile photo showed an attractive woman with dark hair, same woman I'd seen leaving the building. Her work history showed freelance marketing consulting for the past 2 years. Before that, she worked at a startup that failed. No personal social media I could find. Professional presence only. Nothing connecting her to David. David spent Saturday doing yard work. We went grocery shopping together. Had lunch at our usual cafe. Normal weekend couple activities. I watched him carefully for signs of guilt or stress. Saw nothing. He was relaxed and affectionate. Made jokes about the neighbor's terrible lawn care. Held my hand walking through the parking lot. Either he was an incredible actor or he'd compartmentalized his double life so thoroughly it didn't affect him. That night we watched a movie and he fell asleep on the couch. I took his phone from the coffee table, tried his passcode, our anniversary month and day. It worked. I went through his messages carefully. Nothing from Rachel, nothing suspicious. His email showed work correspondence and spam. Calendar was synced to his work schedule. No personal appointments listed. He'd cleaned everything. Monday evening he came home at 6. We ate dinner and he said he'd be working late Wednesday and Friday this week. I nodded and asked about his cases. He launched into details about a contract dispute and discovery deadlines. I let him talk, memorized the case details so I could verify them later. After dinner, I called Julie at his office again. Used a fake name this time. Said I was from a vendor confirming a delivery. Asked about the contract dispute David was working on. She knew exactly what I meant. Confirmed opposing counsel's name, trial date, everything. So that case was real. He was mixing real work details with fake late nights. Smart way to make the lies sound credible. Harder to catch him if most of what he said was technically true. I hired a private investigator Tuesday morning. His name was Leonard Gaines, recommended by Lindsay, who'd used him for tenant issues. I met him at a coffee shop downtown. Showed him the photos of the lease agreement and explained the situation. He didn't look surprised. Said he handled cases like this weekly. Cheating spouses, hidden finances, double lives. He quoted me $1,500 for a week of surveillance plus a background check on Rachel Dumont. I paid half up front. He said he'd start Wednesday when David claimed to be working late. Told me not to do anything that might alert David I knew. Just act normal and let Leonard gather evidence. I could do that. I'd been acting normal for days already. Wednesday evening, David texted at 6. Running late, should be home by 11. I responded with a heart emoji. Watched the tracker on Leonard's reports come through on my email. David left his office at 5:30, drove straight to Oakmont Avenue, parked in spot 3B, entered the building at 5:40. Leonard had positioned himself in the parking lot with a clear view. He took photos of David entering, photos of the apartment windows. At 7:30, Rachel Dumont arrived. She parked next to David's car and went inside carrying groceries. Leonard sent me the photos in real time. I sat in our living room looking at pictures of my husband's girlfriend carrying food into their shared apartment. The apartment they'd been living in together for 6 months while he came home and kissed me goodnight. I didn't cry. I was too angry to cry. Too focused on understanding the full scope of what David had hidden. Because this wasn't just an affair. If it was just an affair, he'd meet her at a hotel or her place. He wouldn't sign a 12-month lease and split rent. Wouldn't maintain a whole separate residence. This was something bigger. Leonard stayed until midnight. David left at 11:45. Rachel's car stayed in the lot. She lived there full-time. He visited 3 nights a week. That was the pattern. Leonard sent a summary report. Confirmed David had been coming to the apartment every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For the past 6 weeks, Leonard could verify through building security footage. Property manager had been cooperative. Building records showed David and Rachel both had key access. Both listed on utilities. Both received mail there. Thursday morning, I checked our mail. Found a credit card statement for an account I didn't recognize. David's name on the card. Chase Visa ending in 4,823. I'd never seen this card. Opened the statement carefully. Balance of $12,000. Charges going back 8 months. Rent payments to Westfield property. Furniture stores. Electronics. Restaurant charges. Grocery stores. He'd been building a credit card balance furnishing the apartment and dating Rachel. I photographed every page. Looked for the actual credit card. Found it Thursday night in his briefcase. Tucked in a side pocket with his business cards. Navy blue card with his name printed on it. I took photos and put it back. 8 months meant this started before the lease. They'd been together since July at least. maybe longer. That Friday evening, I was ready when David texted about working late. I drove to Oakmont Avenue ahead of him, parked down the street where I had a clear view. Leonard was there too in his unmarked van. We'd coordinated. I watched David arrive at 6. Rachel came 20 minutes later. They went inside together. I imagined them cooking dinner together, watching television, going to bed together in the apartment he paid for with hidden credit cards. I drove home at 9 and poured myself wine. Sat in the dark living room drinking and thinking. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. This was calculated, methodical. David had opened a secret credit card account, found an apartment, signed a lease with another woman, furnished it, maintained it for months, all while living with me as my husband. Leonard sent his full report Saturday morning. Rachel Dumont was 32, divorced 2 years ago, no children, worked as a marketing consultant making approximately $60,000 a year, rented apartments in 3 different cities over the past 5 years. No criminal record, no obvious red flags. Her social circle was small, few friends visible on social media, no family in the area. She'd moved here from Nevada 18 months ago, met David through work according to LinkedIn. His firm had hired her for a marketing project last year. That was the connection. She'd worked on rebranding for Fisher and Lane. They'd met professionally and it became personal. She got divorced. He got a second apartment. They built a life together while he kept me in the dark. I spent Saturday organizing evidence, created a folder on my laptop with everything. Photos of the lease, credit card statements, Leonard's surveillance reports, screenshots of Rachel's profiles, photos of David entering the apartment, building records showing his key access, timeline of his lies about working late, text messages where he claimed to be at the office, Julie's confirmation he wasn't working those hours. I had enough to prove he'd been systematically lying for months, enough to prove he'd hidden thousands of dollars in expenses, enough to prove he maintained a relationship with another woman in an apartment they shared. I backed everything up to cloud storage, made copies. This evidence wasn't going to disappear. Sunday morning, David suggested we go hiking, said we hadn't spent enough quality time together lately. The irony was crushing. I agreed and we drove to the state park, walked 3 miles on a trail we'd done dozens of times. He held my hand and talked about maybe taking a vacation this summer. Maybe Hawaii. We'd been talking about Hawaii for years but never booked it. He said his schedule should clear up soon. The big cases would settle. We'd have time to travel. I listened and nodded. Wondered if he was planning to leave me. If the apartment was his exit strategy. A place to land when he finally asked for divorce. Or maybe he thought he could maintain both lives indefinitely. Wife at home, girlfriend across town, whatever worked for him. Monday morning, I called a divorce attorney. Her name was Patricia Vega. She came highly recommended, aggressive and thorough. I met her at her office downtown, showed her everything. The lease, the credit card statements, the surveillance photos, the timeline. She reviewed it methodically, asked detailed questions about our finances. We had the house jointly. He'd paid the down payment but both names on the mortgage, joint bank account, separate retirement accounts from our jobs. No kids. Married 6 years. She said I had grounds for divorce based on adultery and financial deception. Said the hidden credit card debt would work in my favor. He'd accumulated that debt during the marriage using marital funds even if the account was only in his name. I could claim a portion of assets and potentially spousal support given his income exceeded mine substantially. Patricia advised me to gather financial records. Bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts, everything. She said men who hid one bank account often hid others. She'd seen patterns. Guys who maintained double lives usually had complex financial structures to support it. She recommended a forensic accountant, gave me a name, said we should move carefully but quickly. The longer I waited, the more time David had to hide assets if he suspected I knew. I told her I wanted to confront him first, needed to hear what he'd say. She advised against it, said confrontation without legal protection was risky. He could drain accounts, hide documents. She'd seen it happen. But I insisted. I needed to look him in the eye and hear him explain the apartment and Rachel and 6 months of lies. I hired the forensic accountant that afternoon. His name was Martin Cho. He worked with divorce attorneys regularly. I gave him access to our joint account and what financial records I had. He said he'd need a few days to trace David's money, look for hidden accounts, undisclosed assets, patterns of financial deception. He'd worked cases where spouses maintained multiple bank accounts, shell companies, offshore transfers. The wealthy ones got creative. David wasn't wealthy, but he was an attorney. He understood how to structure things. Martin said he'd report back by Thursday. Meanwhile, I should act completely normal. Give David no reason to suspect I was investigating. He'd already been getting away with this for months. Few more days wouldn't change anything. Wednesday evening, David texted about working late. I texted back something supportive. Then I drove to Oakmont Avenue, parked across from the building, waited. David arrived at 6:15. Rachel came at 7. They were in the apartment together. I sat in my car feeling rage build, not just anger, pure rage at the calculated nature of his betrayal. I called Patricia from the car, told her I was ready to file. She said she'd prepare paperwork. We could file Friday. She'd include a motion for temporary financial restraint to prevent him from moving assets. We'd request financial disclosure as part of discovery, force him to reveal everything. The judge would order it once adultery and financial deception were alleged. David would have to come clean about all of it. Martin called Thursday morning with preliminary findings. He'd found 3 bank accounts in David's name I didn't know about. One at a credit union with $17,000, one at an online bank with $8,000, one business account with $4,000. Total of $29,000 hidden from me. He'd been moving money systematically for over a year. Small transfers from his paycheck before it hit our joint account. Direct deposits from work split between multiple accounts. His employer deposited to whatever accounts he specified. He'd set it up so only part of his paycheck went to our joint account. The rest went to accounts I didn't know existed. Martin said this was financial abuse, intentional deception about marital assets, classic divorce case material. Martin found more. David had been paying for Rachel's car insurance, her phone bill, her health insurance through a domestic partner provision at his work. He'd added her as a domestic partner 8 months ago, which meant his employer knew about Rachel. His HR department had paperwork showing he claimed a second domestic partner relationship. Martin pulled the forms. David had checked a box saying he lived with Rachel Dumont as a cohabitating partner, provided the Oakmont Avenue address as their shared residence, listed her as his primary emergency contact. This wasn't just an affair hidden from me. This was a whole separate life documented and formalized with his employer. He'd told his work he lived with Rachel, told me he was working late, maintained 2 completely different versions of reality. I met with Patricia Thursday afternoon. She'd prepared divorce papers, petitions citing irreconcilable differences and adultery, motion for temporary orders regarding finances, request for full financial disclosure, proposed division of assets accounting for his hidden accounts and dissipation of marital funds. She'd calculated he'd spent roughly $40,000 on the apartment, Rachel, and their shared life over the past 8 months. Rent, furniture, utilities, her expenses, everything. That was $40,000 of marital income spent on his girlfriend without my knowledge or consent. Patricia said the judge would not look favorably on that. We could potentially recover half of what he'd wasted. She filed everything electronically Thursday evening. David would be served Friday at his office. Friday morning, I packed a bag, took essential documents, clothes, my laptop, important personal items, loaded them in my car. I wasn't leaving permanently, but I wanted security. Wanted the option to not come back if the confrontation went badly. Leonard had provided me a photo of David and Rachel together on their balcony. Clear shot of them standing close, his arm around her waist. Taken Wednesday night. I printed it. Put it in an envelope with a copy of the lease agreement. Left it on the kitchen counter where David would see it when he got home. Then I drove to a hotel downtown, checked in, waited. The process server called at 2. He'd served David at his office, handed him the divorce petition and temporary order in front of colleagues. David tried to refuse the papers. Server told him that didn't matter. He was served. Legal process had started. David called me at 2:15, 16 times in a row. I didn't answer. He texted me 30 times over the next hour, asking what was happening, saying we needed to talk, begging me to call him back, saying there'd been a misunderstanding. I turned my phone on silent. Patricia called at 4, said David's attorney had already contacted her. He'd hired someone fast. They wanted to negotiate. She told them we weren't negotiating until full financial disclosure was complete. They'd agreed to provide bank records and account information by Monday. She said that was faster than usual. He knew he was caught. David showed up at the hotel at 7. I don't know how he found me. Maybe he tracked my phone. Maybe he called every hotel downtown. He knocked on my door, called my name through the door, said he could explain everything. I opened the door and looked at him. His face was red, eyes panicked. He'd been crying. He started talking immediately, said it wasn't what it looked like. Rachel was a friend who needed help. He'd co-signed the apartment because she couldn't qualify alone. He went there sometimes to check on things. That was all. Nothing romantic. I held up the photo Leonard had taken. Him and Rachel on the balcony with his arm around her. He stopped talking, stared at the photo. I let him inside, closed the door. Asked him to explain why his employer had paperwork listing Rachel as his domestic partner. Explain the $40,000 spent on her over 8 months. Explain why he'd told his work he lived with her while telling me he was working late. David sat on the edge of the bed, put his head in his hands, said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. He said he'd met Rachel 2 years ago. They'd become close. He'd developed feelings. She'd gotten divorced partly because of him. He'd wanted to leave me but couldn't, wasn't ready. So he'd found a compromise, kept both relationships, maintained both lives, thought he could make it work indefinitely. He looked up at me and said he loved us both. Couldn't choose, didn't want to hurt anyone. I laughed. Couldn't help it. He'd hurt everyone. Me, Rachel, himself. His career reputation once this became public at his firm. His financial stability once the divorce settlement went through. All of it damaged because he wanted 2 women and couldn't be honest. I told him about Martin's findings, the hidden accounts, the money he'd siphoned, the systematic deception. David's face went pale. He asked if I'd told Rachel. I said I hadn't spoken to her, didn't plan to. That was his problem to solve. He'd built this situation. He could figure out how to tell his girlfriend he was married and getting divorced. I told him to leave the hotel. He tried to argue, said we should talk more, work through this. I told him his attorney could talk to my attorney. Nothing else needed to be said. David left at 9. I sat in the hotel room feeling empty. 6 years of marriage over because he'd wanted a second relationship and thought he deserved both. No conversation, no chance to make a choice. Just deception and hidden accounts and a girlfriend I'd never heard of until this week. I called Lindsay. She came to the hotel with takeout food and wine. Let me talk through everything. She'd been through a divorce 3 years ago. Different circumstances, but same emotional devastation. She said the betrayal was the worst part. Worse than the actual end of the relationship. The knowledge that someone you trusted had been lying systematically, making calculated choices to deceive you while acting loving and normal. That psychological damage took time to heal. Martin sent his complete report Saturday morning. He'd found a fourth account. Investment account with $12,000 in stocks. David had opened it 14 months ago. Before Rachel. Before the apartment. He'd been planning his exit or his double life for over a year, setting up financial infrastructure to support it. The timeline made it clear this wasn't impulsive. He'd thought about it, prepared for it, executed it methodically. Martin's report totaled the hidden assets at $41,000 in cash and investments, plus the $40,000 spent on the apartment and Rachel. David had diverted over $80,000 from our marriage. Our joint account had $35,000. The house had maybe $80,000 in equity. We had roughly $200,000 in total assets, and he'd already spent or hidden half of it. Patricia filed an amended motion Saturday afternoon, requested the judge freeze all of David's accounts pending full disclosure, included Martin's report showing the hidden accounts and systematic financial deception, requested emergency hearing for Monday morning. The judge granted it Saturday evening, signed a temporary order freezing David's accounts except for basic living expenses. He couldn't move money or hide assets now. Everything was locked pending disclosure. Patricia said the judge was clearly concerned about the pattern of deception. Judges took financial fraud seriously in divorce cases, especially when one spouse had maintained secret accounts and hidden significant marital assets. David would have to answer for all of it under oath. Monday morning hearing was brief. David's attorney tried to argue the accounts were separate property. Patricia destroyed that argument with Martin's report showing the money came from his salary during our marriage, marital income, community property. The judge ordered David to provide complete financial disclosure by Wednesday. All accounts, all statements, all credit cards, everything. Ordered him to explain where the $80,000 went. Scheduled another hearing for Friday to review his disclosures. The judge also ordered David to pay my attorney fees through the divorce. Said his deception had necessitated my legal costs. He was responsible for those expenses. Patricia estimated my legal fees would run $20,000 before this was done. David would have to pay all of it. David's disclosure came Wednesday. His attorney had clearly told him cooperation was his only option now. He provided statements for all 4 hidden accounts, credit cards showing every charge to the apartment and Rachel, paycheck stubs showing how he'd split his deposits, tax returns showing unreported income from a side consulting business he'd been running. David had been doing legal consulting on weekends, making an extra $30,000 a year. Money I never knew about, never saw, all going into his hidden accounts. Patricia said this was worse than she'd expected. Not only had he hidden money, he'd hidden income. Failed to report it on our joint taxes. That was potential tax fraud. She was reporting it to the IRS. They'd investigate. Friday hearing lasted 2 hours. Judge reviewed everything. Asked David direct questions about his financial deception, why he'd hidden accounts, why he'd failed to disclose income, why he'd spent $40,000 on another woman while married to me. David's answers were weak. Said he'd kept money separate for privacy. Judge asked what privacy meant in a marriage where finances were supposed to be joint. David couldn't answer. Said he'd made mistakes. Judge asked about Rachel. David admitted they'd been in a relationship for 2 years. Admitted he'd maintained 2 households. Admitted he'd lied to me throughout. Judge looked disgusted. Said this was one of the more egregious cases of marital financial deception he'd seen. Judge ordered David to pay me $60,000 in immediate equalization for the money he'd hidden and spent. Said David had depleted marital assets for personal benefit. I was entitled to reimbursement. Ordered David to pay my legal fees in full. Ordered the house be sold and proceeds split evenly. Ordered all remaining accounts be split 50-50. Calculated our total assets at $190,000 including the house equity. After David paid me $60,000 equalization and $20,000 legal fees, we'd split what was left. I'd end up with approximately $115,000. David would have $75,000 and his debt from the hidden credit cards. He'd also face IRS investigation for unreported income. Patricia said the judge had been generous to me, clearly sided with me given David's conduct. Rachel called me Sunday morning. Her voice was shaking. She said she needed to talk, asked if we could meet. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She looked terrible, hadn't slept. She said David told her Friday night he was married. She'd had no idea. Thought he was divorced. He'd told her his divorce finalized 2 years ago. She'd met him during his separation, or that's what he'd claimed. She'd believed him. Never questioned it. Never asked to see divorce papers. Trusted him completely. Now she understood he'd been lying to her the entire time. She'd built a life with a married man who'd lied about being available. She was devastated. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I told Rachel about the $40,000, the money David spent on their apartment and her expenses. Money that came from our marriage. She looked sick, said she didn't know, thought he was just generous. Never asked where the money came from. Assumed he made good money as an attorney and could afford it. I told her about the domestic partner paperwork at his work. She knew about that. He'd added her for health insurance. Said it was easier than her getting her own plan. She'd thought it was sweet. Helpful. Never occurred to her it was fraudulent since he was married to someone else. She asked what I wanted from her. I said nothing. She was a victim too. Just differently. David had lied to both of us, built separate lives based on deception. We were both collateral damage. Rachel and I talked for an hour. She told me their relationship. How David had been attentive and romantic. Talked about their future together. Discussed eventually buying a house. Maybe having kids. She'd believed all of it. Built her life around being with him. She'd moved here from Nevada partly for him. Turned down job opportunities elsewhere to stay close. Now everything was revealed as fake. He'd never planned a real future with her. Just wanted a second life he could visit 3 nights a week. She asked if I thought he'd loved either of us. I said I didn't know. Maybe he'd loved what we each provided. Me for stability and legitimacy. Her for excitement and escape. But real love required honesty. He'd given neither of us that. The divorce finalized in August. 6 months of legal proceedings. David fought initially but eventually settled when his attorney made clear he couldn't win. Judge's ruling from May stood. I got $115,000 from asset division. David paid all legal fees. House sold in July. I moved to an apartment downtown. Smaller than the house, but entirely mine. David moved full-time to the Oakmont Avenue apartment with Rachel. That relationship lasted another 2 months before she broke up with him. Couldn't trust him after everything. Couldn't build a future with someone who'd lied so thoroughly. She moved back to Nevada in October. David stayed in that apartment alone, paying full rent now, living with the consequences of his choices. I started therapy in September. Needed help processing the betrayal, the systematic nature of it, understanding how someone could lie so effectively for so long. My therapist said people who maintain double lives often compartmentalized extremely well. David had probably felt justified, entitled to both relationships. Some people believed they deserved whatever made them happy regardless of who got hurt. It took months to stop feeling like I'd missed obvious signs, to accept that he'd been skilled at deception. That wasn't my failure, it was his. By winter, I was sleeping better, feeling more stable. The IRS investigation was ongoing. David would likely face penalties for unreported income, but probably not criminal charges, just financial consequences. His reputation at the firm was damaged but not destroyed. He still worked there, kept his head down. We never spoke again after the divorce except through attorneys. That was fine with me. I had nothing to say to him. A year later, I ran into David at the grocery store. We made eye contact across the produce section. He looked older, tired. Started to say something, but I walked away. I'd rebuilt my life without him. Thrived professionally with more time to focus on work. Dated occasionally, but wasn't rushing into anything serious. Learned to trust my instincts again. Found peace in my small apartment and simple routine. David had gambled on maintaining 2 lives and lost both. I'd lost a marriage but gained clarity. Learned what I wouldn't tolerate. Built stronger boundaries. That was worth more than staying married to someone who'd thought he could split himself between 2 women indefinitely and never face consequences. The grocery store encounter lasted 10 seconds. Then I left with my groceries and my life, and he stood there with his cart and his regrets. And that felt like exactly the ending we both deserved. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.